Hi, Divine. Divine? Hello, Divine.
Yes.
This is Marim. I just wanted from FU, not Marim Redai, Marim Hassani. I just wanted to check that you can hear me. I can hear you well.
Yes, I can hear you. Just one second. For some reason, but can you hear me?
Yeah, yeah, I can hear you very well. Just
Okay,
please
just a
mute your
second.
mic, please,
I need to.
because your voice is a bit far.
It's a bit far.
Yes, if you can raise the volume of your mic,
Hmm.
that would be great. Okay,
Okay,
thank
just a
you.
sec. Just a
We'll let
second.
you know right before we start.
Is that a bit better? Hello? Is that better? Hello? Hello? Hello?
Yes, we can hear you, and it's much better now.
Okay.
Okay, thank
And
you.
I can also hear you much better.
Hi, Komla. Hello, Komla.
Hello.
Hi,
Good,
how
good
are you
morning.
doing? We're just doing a test, so you can hear us very well, and we can hear you.
Yes, perfectly. I can hear you. I hope you can hear me too.
Yeah, yeah, we can
Good
hear
morning,
you
Divine.
very well. Yeah, and we're still not live. We're just doing a test because we have a very complicated sound system and as a kind of setup here. So we're just checking
Yes,
before
we
we
can
start.
hear you clearly, except that it's a kind of slight echoing
Yes.
uh, behind you, but otherwise it's all good.
Yes. I can. Hi, Komla. How are you?
I'm good, thanks.
Yes. And I can hear Komla clearer, much, much more clearer. Like Komla said, with you there is a slight break and an echo in the background. But Komla is very clear to me.
Test, test. Can you hear me? Can you hear me? If anyone can let me know.
Yes,
Good
Ahmed, I
morning.
can
Can you
hear
hear
you.
me? If
I can hear
kindly
you
confirm
from my side.
any of the participants if I'm audible. All right. Okay. A very good morning, everyone, or anyone in the room. We would be starting with our session on investing in mitigating food loss and waste. As you know, this is part of the series or the track that Food and Agriculture Organization is organizing, titled Investing in Transforming Agri-Food Systems. And we know that food loss and waste is a very significant component in the agri-food systems where we need to invest. So to start with, my name is Ahmed Mukhtar. I'm Head of Strategy and Policy and Senior Economist at the FAO Regional Office for Near East and North Africa. And with us, we would have a very distinguished panel. Two colleagues are joining us online. Mr. Dwayne Niger, he is the Deputy Director of the Food Systems and Food Safety Division at the FAO headquarters. Then we have Madame Khulud Al Nawais. She's Chief Sustainability Officer of the Emirates Foundation, and she's the Secretary General of the NEMA Committee and would be sharing the experience of NEMA initiative with us. I hope we would be having Mr. Jorge Celis. He's the Director of the UN Environment's One Planet Network online. We have with us Ms. Federica Falomi. She's the Chief of the Research and Analysis Technology Needs Assessment at the United Nations Technology Bank for LDCs. Then online joining us is Komla Prosper BC. He's Senior Advisor at the AFCFTA, the African Continental Free Trade Agreement Secretariat. And then with us we have Tony Roberto. He's Strategic Advisor at the Tony Blair Institute for Global Change. What a coincidence of the names, Tony. I hope that was the qualification to be chosen. Okay, so first, if I may request our distinguished panelists to be on the stage, and then we would start. So, Madam Khulud, Tony, and Federica, if you can kindly join us. Okay, I'm sure you know the sound protocols. If in case you want to hear me or the panelists, you have to put this headphones on and channel number 8. And if you have not put on, then unfortunately you would not hear this announcement. But I'm assuming that you would have to hear because that's my duty to say. Okay, let's start. We have already wasted 8 minutes, but I'm sure the discussion would not give you any of the loss at the end of the session. What we would do in this discussion for next about 80 to 90 minutes is to underline the need for raising awareness and to basically capture the extent of food loss and waste, the causes and drivers and its impact on the sustainability from environmental, social, and economic perspective. We have been hearing all of these headline numbers, and of course from our Deputy Director Divine, we would hear in detail that 1/3 of the food is either lost or wasted. In fact, that is not just a number, to be said.
Please note that there's a high-level roundtable on investment in sustainable infrastructure in Hall 4, Room 13. Thank you.
Thank you very much for belittling our session. We are even higher level on food loss and waste, and we need to have our infrastructure of the stomachs and the agriculture productions. So kindly stay here, don't go for that announcement. So what we would do is that, in order to basically sensitize the development community, and more importantly, why do we need to invest in mitigating food loss and waste? As I said, the numbers are not just numbers. As of now, as you know, around 800 million people are hungry in the world. And if you only stop the whole wastage and loss, you can feed them at least twice. And these are the numbers, or let's say the proportions that we have to be mindful of. Now, the region where we are sitting, food waste it's a serious issue. In some countries or in some product lines, it goes even up to 40 to 45%. So what we would try to do is that we would see what are the challenges, how to mitigate those challenges by investing through the innovative investment mechanisms or public-private partnerships, and what do we get out of that. So in order to basically put everything in context, all of these numbers, challenges, and what should be done, if I may request, Divine, I believe that you have a presentation or you would like to share a statement or some of the numbers with us that would provide as a keynote or a scene setting for the discussion, and then we would go to the panelists. So Divine, if you can kindly confirm. I think Divine is online, colleagues.
Yes, I am online and I can hear you very well. I have a short presentation.
Okay.
Yeah, you're broken off there.
Now we are fine.
Okay. Okay. Good morning. Good morning, everyone. Mr. Ahmed Mokhtar has already introduced me. My name is Divine Njie. I am the Deputy Director of the Food and Agriculture Organization, FAO, Division on Food Systems and Food Safety. So if, with your permission, I will share my screen and give you just a 5-minute kind of keynote presentation. So let me share my screen. Okay, Ahmed, the host has disabled screen sharing. So from my end, it looks like you will have to allow me to share my screen. At this point, it is not possible. Could you, Ahmed, can you hear me?
Yes, Divine, just give us 30 seconds, please.
Sure.
I'm told that it is allowed. Could you kindly try again, Divine?
Okay.
We can see your screen.
Okay, perfect. So now I can put it on presentation mode. Okay, can you see it still?
Yes.
Okay, great. So thank you very much for this opportunity to make this short presentation, and I will title it Food Loss and Waste Prevention and Reduction, a Key Lever for Agri-Food Systems Transformation. I want to underline in this title of the presentation the aspect related to agri-food systems transformation. Food loss and waste is not reduced for reducing sake. We are reducing food loss and waste as an entry point for agri-food systems transformation. We need to adopt the systems holistic approach for the reasons that I will outline in my presentation. So just to understand what we are talking about, if you look at the food supply chain going from the harvest, or if in the case of animals and livestock products, the slaughter, then the post-harvest and post-slaughter operations, transport, storage, distribution, processing, packaging, and then all the way to the consumer. So we are looking at that chain within a system, a food system or an agri-food system. And essentially what we are saying is that when you hone in and go deep into this specific chain, there are losses that occur as the food product is moved along between the post-harvest and the retail segments. And then eventually when the product reaches the consumer end or within retail or food services like restaurants, there is wastage. So there is food waste towards the point where the consumer touches or interacts with the product. So that's the system we're talking about. And within the framework of the SDGs, we have empirically agreed to refer to the segment between the post-harvest all the way to, but excluding retail, as referring to losses. And then for the retail and food service and consumer end, we are referring to that as waste. And for SDG monitoring, there is a global food loss index, which is monitored by FAO, and there is a food waste index, which is monitored by the UN environment, UNEP. So that's the system we're talking about. And if you look down in the slide, you would see that the initial estimates of these indices, the food loss index and the food waste index, are indicating that between the post-harvest and retail segments, we are losing globally up to 13%, slightly above 13% of what we produce globally. And from, so that's estimated by FAO. And then from UNEP's estimations, 17% of global food supply is wasted in that, what you're seeing in the green parts of the slide. So retail, consumer, and food service providers. So imagine what we're talking about. These are immense quantities. When you convert those percentages to tons of food, calories, and nutrients, it's you can imagine the immensity, the monstrosity of what we're talking about here, the magnitude, and we will see subsequently the sort of impacts that has. So I talked about this estimate of about 13.2% for globally for the food loss side, but that's a global figure. And as you can see in this slide, regional differences do occur. And in sub-Saharan Africa, for example, the lowest bar, you see that the percentage goes all the way as high as 20%. So this is 20% in sub-Saharan Africa. And then in North America and Europe, it's a little bit, well, not a little bit, it's significantly lower. So we are around 9%. But in the region where you are attending this meeting, so and that is captured in the Western Asia, Northern Africa region. So we're talking at about 14% of losses occurring. And there are significant quantities of wastes also, but in this slide, we are focusing on losses. But this is just, the idea here is that while we talk about this global figure, it is important to keep in mind that there are regional differences. And because of this, the intervention packages too will have to be different. Now, here is just a snapshot of what might be causing these losses and wastes that we've seen in the previous slides. And on this particular slide, I have assembled examples of direct causes of food loss and waste. So at any specific point in the supply chain or the value chain, what could be driving these losses? So those are direct causes. And you see here, these range from poor production and harvesting techniques, all the way to poor storage conditions, inadequate marketing techniques, and when you go to the consumer end, inappropriate consumer behavior during purchase, during the preparation and the consumption of food. So these are examples of direct causes. Now, secondary causes also arise. So these are causes that are not point specific, but can be caused from one part of the, can be instigated from one part of the chain and then arise at other parts. So examples are inadequate equipment, transport and storage capacity, poor organization of the value chain. So that is how the value chain actors relate to one another, and inadequate infrastructure for storage of perishable products, for example, and even durable grains. If you have inadequate infrastructure, it will drive losses. So those are examples of secondary causes. And the last one there is referring to what happens at the consumer end. Because consumers do not have a limited understanding of those labels and information that you see on packages, it also drives food losses and waste. So these are some examples of secondary causes. We saw direct causes. These are secondary causes, but there are also systemic causes. So this is where the environment as a whole, the enabling environment as a whole, is not conducive, is not suitable for optimal operations within the supply chain. And those systemic causes, they drive secondary causes, they also drive the direct causes. So inadequate policies, inadequate institutions, and legislation can be systemic weaknesses. Now, we're here for an investment forum, and essentially these drivers and causes of food loss and waste are the specific investment areas that we need to look at. Context specific in one country, in the Middle East, where the context might be different, but we need to, in each case, look at those drivers and causes, and these are then what we would need to consider in deciding on the investments to be made. So the investments could be in building infrastructure for storage, for transportation, improving communication across the value chain, to issues that the public sector needs to handle, such as putting regulations and putting into place institutions for capacity building and so on. So those are some of the investment areas. Now, we've looked at the causes, but of course, what is the rationale for investing in this on this issue? This slide captures things from a food security point of view. We have those huge quantities of losses and waste occurring against a backdrop of immense and significant food insecurity and malnutrition. Mr. Ahmed Mokhtar has already alluded to the high numbers of millions who face hunger, estimated as between 690 to 780 million people facing hunger, 3.1 billion lacking access to healthy diets, and so on. So the numbers are really alarming. And this is the food security picture. Now, but look, this is an argument for why we should invest in this issue. And here, just looking at the issue of the nutrition dimension, which I mentioned, those millions being malnourished and so on, simulations show that if we reduced food loss and waste by 50%, there would be enough sufficient fruits and vegetables to cover the nutrition recommendations globally. So this here is making the argument just on one particular parameter, that is just the nutritional dimension. And we could do the same for other parameters, the environmental, the economic, and so on. And then just so we spoke about those nutritional and food security aspects, but it doesn't end there. Food loss and waste also does have significant impact on livelihoods, on the economy, on natural resources. So we talked about 13% being lost. That's estimated to be about, in value, $400 billion US. Food loss and waste also contributes significantly to greenhouse gas emissions. And as you know, greenhouse gases contribute to unstable climate and extreme weather events. 8 to 10% of greenhouse gases can be linked directly to food loss and waste. And there are other environmental and natural resource implications of food loss and waste. As you see there, billions of hectares of land are cleared for food that eventually is lost and wasted. Immense quantities of water, 250 cubic kilometers, that is roughly the size of Lake Geneva. It's water that goes into producing food. Where this session is hosted in the region, we have significant issues with water. But just imagine the quantities of water that are embedded in what eventually goes to loss and waste. And then, of course, there are ecosystems and biodiversity issues that are linked to food loss and waste. So the rationale is there. It's food security, it's nutrition, it's hunger, it's poverty, it's environmental, it's climate change. We have unpredictable weather. We've seen that across the world. So here is one low-hanging fruit that we can all work towards in order to address some of these existential issues that mankind faces at this point, and even in the foreseeable future if we do not make changes. So if we reduce food losses and waste, we can address food security and malnutrition. We can improve productivity and stimulate economic growth. And of course, it leads to better environmental stewardship. So these triple wins are there, and these are big ticket elements, whether you're looking at the local level, whether you're looking at the national level, and whether you're looking at even the global level. These are triple wins that we can get from reducing food loss and waste. So, Mokhtar, I think I can stop here as an introduction, and this was meant to just stimulate the discussion. We've seen here the significant numbers and the impact that this issue of food loss and waste has, and I hope we should be able to hone into the specific investments that need to be made in order to address this issue. Thank you, and I hand it back over to you.
Thank you so much, Divine. That was brilliant. You have really established a business case, let's say, or the investment case. Thanks for sharing all of context setting, and I'm sure we would hear now the practical examples and the initiatives and what needs to be done. Out of the factors that you mentioned towards the end, I would say consumer behavior is also quite important. For example, nowadays when you go to the supermarkets, it's not the shelves for the fruits and vegetables, it's the fashion shows. And oftentimes we as consumers body shame some of the potatoes or apples that we don't like. But I believe that every apple or potato would be the same taste regardless of its shape. So I mean that's an element that we have to incorporate. I'm sure you mentioned in the initial ones, but the consumer behavior, particularly on the food waste side. So now we can move on to some of the solutions. As I said, particularly on the behavioral side, I believe that the Emirates Foundation has been doing quite a lot of good work, and we have an excellent example of the NEMA initiative. So, Madam Khulud, we will start with you. You're the Chief Sustainability Officer of the Emirates Foundation, and we know Emirates Foundation's work, tremendous work, particularly on many of the SDGs, poverty and food, and so on and so forth. But particularly, if you can briefly share with us what, well, maybe for some people, Emirates Foundation is new, then the NEMA initiative, and in particular, how do you see that NEMA Foundation type of initiatives can be scaled up and taken to the other constituencies as well? So over to you.
Thank you, Ahmed, for the introduction. And thanks to Mr. Divine for really framing the problem really well. Um, uh, the Emirates Foundation is a philanthropic entity that's focused on public-private partnerships and looking at global risks. One of these risks, of course, is linked to food security, and that is why we worked in collaboration with the Ministry of Climate Change and Environment and the Presidential Court to launch NEMA as the National Food Loss and Waste Initiative. that is really delivering on one of the key pillars of the food security strategy of the UAE, and that is to tackle food loss and waste. The aim of the initiative is really, as Mr. Divine highlighted, also in line with the UN Sustainable Development Goal number 12.3, is to reduce food loss and waste by 50% by the year 2030. Na'ma is really about a holistic and systemic approach whereby we focus a lot on collective action, which requires really the collaboration and partnerships with everyone across the food supply chain, all the way from production, as Mr. Divine explained, to household, and also looking at the waste management side, and how valorization can help us also reduce food waste that reaches landfill, because of the impact that we saw on some of the statistics shared, where food waste actually contributes to climate change. 8 to 10% of the food waste basically brings about greenhouse gases. So we want to be able to reduce food loss and waste. How we are doing that, and you touched about one of our key pillars is really to increase awareness to the general community in the UAE, but also to look at behavioral change, which is not easily achieved overnight. However, what we have done in Na'ma is we have looked at behavioral science and how can we bring behavioral science nudges or interventions where it could help us reduce food loss and waste and raise awareness at the same time. And here maybe I would like to highlight the practicality of implementing things in steps that are easy for consumers to follow and for businesses also to adopt. We did a pilot with a catering company called Akuro that supplies food to Jumeirah hotels, whereby we introduced 3 simple nudges. One is messaging in their staff canteens, on the tables, and this is a very hospitable culture where we offer food that generously through buffets. So at the buffets, we introduced a lot of messages around the topic, the importance of food loss and waste, sharing a lot of the statistics that was shared today, but we also introduced portion size control, where we had what an ideal portion looks like on the buffet, because we know that people usually pile up their plates, and again, they end up only consuming 1/3 of what's on their plate. So we want to avoid that. We also introduced waste measurement at many of the canteens and the restaurants, because again, as mentioned, statistics and understanding the size of the problem in the UAE needs to improvement. So we introduced measurement, but we also introduced the concept of waste separation, because that's another key problem that is leading to us not being able to measure actual food loss and waste in the UAE. So with all these nudges being applied at some of these venues, after a period of 13 weeks, we have seen that food waste has dropped by 44% in those venues. So these pilots have actually proved that food loss and waste can be reduced. So we started scaling up this across the food services sector. We launched a call to action in August, whereby many of the hotels, the big chains, have actually have taken the Na'ma pledge to reduce food loss and waste. And we are now running the trial. We've taken 5 weeks of baseline data, and now we are capturing another 5 weeks of implementing these nudges, and the results of that will be presented at COP28. So this is just to highlight some of our practical steps in Na'ma to reduce food waste, but also we are the other pillars in Na'ma are focused on not only raising awareness and behavioral change, but also on really introducing measurement. We know that there is lack of data on actual food loss and waste in the UAE, so we're tackling this by conducting a baseline study, which we are embarking on now with many of the local government authorities, so that we can have what Mr. Divine introduced, a food loss and a food waste index for the UAE in the long term. The other pillar that is also key to Na'ma, as I mentioned, is collaboration and partnership. We cannot achieve this on our own, but the idea is to collaborate with different industries across the supply chain to co-create together the right solutions that allow us to tackle food loss and waste in their own industries. And the fourth pillar looks at policies and regulations which are key. So now we are really advocating to get all these sectors on board to support the Na'ma initiative and to work closely with us to implement different pilots, because we want to introduce the willingness for change. But in the long term, we want to use these success stories of these pilots to introduce new guidelines and policies that help us basically create a more enabling environment for food loss and waste. And the fifth pillar looks at innovation and technology, which is core to basically creating efficiencies across the supply chain. We've been investing in new startups who have new ideas and new technologies and applications that can help us basically rescue food by simply connecting food donors to the charities, where surplus food could be easily picked up and redirected to those who are in need. Looking at technologies like Reloop, where they actually take unedible food and turn it into fertilizer, and again rediverting food waste from reaching landfill by turning it into usable products such as fertilizer, and that's helping us close the loop, creating a better circular economy. So these are also some of the models where we are trying to integrate technology and innovation across the supply chain, but we are also trying to create a more circular economy to reduce food loss and waste.
Excellent. That's brilliant. I think that's almost an investment case study that Madame Khulud mentioned, and I think we all need to opt for that. Before going to Federica and Jorge, I would emphasize, first to confess my guilt that I also misuse the buffets. So I confess that. But problem is that in UAE you have fantastic cuisines and restaurants. So that's your fault as host, Kermit.
I think we all do. And, we have a lot of corporate events, large weddings. We want to really raise awareness to the consumer to adopt more sustainable consumption habits. I think through a lot of the awareness campaigns that we started last Ramadan, and we will continue, of course, to work on this, will really help us change some of the current behaviors.
Absolutely, and I could not agree more that we need to invest on two types of trade-offs. One is the changing mindset in the consumers between trade-off of wasting food and healthy diets as well at the same time. And second trade-off, in my view, the most important one is the trade-off, the policy trade-off. Because oftentimes, if you look at the regulatory systems dealing with the food, particularly food safety, oftentimes they are contributing, I'm being very cautious, contributing towards food waste, particularly in the retail level and others. So we have to find the best trade-off. And France did do that, some years ago, and we have an example of those regulatory systems, and I think now it is going EU-wide. Thanks a lot. I think that really sets us in a very good course. Now, I just wanted to confirm with colleagues, is Jorge online from One Planet Network or no? Can someone kindly confirm? Is Jorge online? No? Okay. We'll wait. So Next, you mentioned, Madam Khulud, the technology as well, and we have colleagues from the UN Technology Bank who are particularly working on the LDCs and the developing countries. So, Federica, you are chief of the research and analysis and the assessments. So I'm sure you would have looked at, some of these behavioral aspects, or the policy pathways through the technology interventions, in the developing countries and LDCs. So if you can share with us some of the perspectives, some of the lessons learned, or particularly the pathways that countries can opt by using technology as an enabler to mitigate food loss and waste, so that if one invests in, mainstreaming the technology, the type of technologies that would have this impact, I mean, mitigating the food loss and waste, should be a better investment. So please let us know what type of technologies, not the companies, because that would be a disclosure, then we would buy the shares, but the ideas. Over to you, Federica.
Thank you very much, and thank you very much for the invite to join this wonderful panel on such an important topic. I think we framed the problem very well from the very beginning. It's a huge problem that needs urgent solutions to be addressed. And as you introduced, I'm working at the UN Technology Bank for the LDCs, for the least developed countries. So I would like to bring in the perspective of these 46 countries, 33 of which are in Africa, and these are countries that suffer from the most severe structural impediment, from low income, limited access to technological solutions, limited access to private investment, and at the same time they rely heavily on production and export of commodities. So very fragile economies, and particularly important when we think about the problem of food loss and waste. We have to acknowledge that it is a very different story when we look at developing and particularly least developed countries, and when we look at developed economies. These are countries in which over 65% of the total food loss happens at the production and harvest and storage phases. So very early in the chain, and mostly at the level of the farmers. So we are in need of solutions that reach that level, which is often very rural and therefore tricky and complicated to address. And of course, this loss has huge economic implications for farmers that often, particularly in sub-Saharan Africa, they live out of $2 a day, and the total economic value that is lost only for post-harvest losses is around $4 billion in sub-Saharan Africa. So if we think about these figures, there's a huge economic gains that these farmers are directly missing out because of these losses, right? And secondly, they're missing out on the capacity to add value to their products, which would deliver again additional economic benefits because most of this product is lost in these very early stages of the value chain, right? And of course, we've heard that there are huge social costs of these 800 millions that you mentioned before. Over 250 millions are in the 46 least developed countries that are severely food insecure, and the extreme dependency of these countries from trade. These countries do not have the capacity to produce the quantity of food they need to meet their domestic demand, right? So they're extremely vulnerable from crises and external shocks. We've seen it in the past few years, COVID, the Ukraine war, and how all of these shocks have impacted the availability of food in these countries and the capacity to meet food demand, and therefore address food security issues. And this is not likely to improve easily in the next 7 years that we have left to achieve the SDGs. And we already have projections from FAO that around 300 million are still going to be facing hunger in 2030, and this is a failure of the global agenda of leaving no one behind. So this requires urgently concrete solutions to ensure access to food. But importantly, if we look at access to food only from the perspective of investing in increased productivity, we're missing part of the story, right? So it makes no financial sense to invest in producing more food or increasing productivity unless we tackle the loss, because otherwise it's like saying almost a third of what we invest in these countries is lost across the value chain. So that makes no financial sense, really, right? So it is an urgent problem to be addressed. And when we look at the needs of these countries specifically, from the Technology Bank's perspective, as you said, I'm working on the technology needs assessments particularly, and these are the assessments we conduct in these countries together with the government, of course, and various stakeholders, where we look specifically at what are the needs that these countries have in terms of technological solution that they can access and deploy to address some of their greatest development challenges, right? And in over 80% of the ones that we've conducted today, which are 12, so we've covered 12 countries already. A few more are in the pipeline of being completed this year. Over 80% of those, they've identified great needs in the agricultural sector, agri-food system as a whole. And therefore, we've acknowledged this, and we've realized, even more importantly, that most often the losses at the post-harvest level, they are due to factors that are very heavily related to technology and know-how and expertise, right? So these countries, they face lack of access to even the most basic, sometimes technological solutions, because if you think about some of the examples that cause these losses, for example, the harvest is mostly done manually, right? So the lack of mechanization can cause delays that then, if the harvest is not done at the right time, then generates losses of food. And again, drying is mostly, these farmers mostly rely on sun drying. And if the weather conditions are not appropriate, or the weather is unstable, and that is also due to the climate change that we're seeing, that again risks of creating a drying process that is not appropriate and can create loss of quality and loss of food. So technological solution in post-harvest, particularly in post-harvest management, often require very modest investments. These are simple technologies. They are not hugely complicated technologies, but can deliver larger gains, particularly compared to increasing investment in production stage, right? So this is something that we've decided to prioritize from a technology bank's perspective. So having a focus on ensuring access and improved access to low-cost technological solution. And there's a WFP study actually conducted in Burkina Faso and Uganda, 2 LDCs, that has shown that through access to the simplest technology, the losses can be reduced up to 98%. So it means it works. And we want to prove it even further, in a sense, from a very small perspective, as a newly established UN entity, where we're approaching this problem through small pilots demonstration, right? So we want to show that small technology demonstration can take place and remove these barriers at the farmers level. To do that, for example, we've recently initiated a pilot project in the Gambia, where we had conducted technology needs assessment and realized that over 30% of the harvest in cashew nuts, so not even cereal, like even a more strategic, let's say, product, because it can also, of course, improve in terms of their exporting and also value addition throughout the chain. Over 30% was lost at the post-harvest phase, right? So we have, the Technology Bank is based in Turkey, and Turkey is well known for their huge investment in developing the hazelnut sector, right? So we're working very closely with the Food Institute in Turkey to see which technologies from the hazelnut sector, particularly for the drying stage and post-harvest management techniques even, because sometimes it's even the know-how, technical expertise that can help these farmers improve their post-harvest management practices. So which of these practices and technologies can be transferred to farmers in the Gambia to reduce the post-harvest management losses in the cashew nuts specifically. And this is currently being initiated and ongoing, and we hope that that this will sort of pave the way, once demonstrating its effectiveness, will pave the way for increased private investment as well. Once the case is demonstrated, technology effectiveness is demonstrated, to scale it up even further. And like the Gambia, it's just one example, but there's many LDCs in very similar situation that would benefit from investment in similar technologies which are not particularly sophisticated. And of course, ultimately, last point I want to make, while the multilateral organizations are there to support with this type of intervention. And of course, the private sector has to come in to provide the financial support, because the LDCs do not have the capacity to address these gaps on their own. But they definitely have the responsibility of creating the right policy and environmental and institutional environment, and ensure that once the agricultural investment strategies and programs and plan are put forth, food loss is given an utmost priority in terms of planning and in terms of financial resources as well. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Federica. Well, by the way, you guys are lucky that you have Tashfascio with you, our ex-boss. Love you, Tashfascio, as head of the tech bank. Okay, couple of points. One, what I figured out is that, and we have been making a lot of noise, that technology does not mean that you have to have advanced GIS-based sensors to get the moisture, soil moisture. I'm talking about the agriculture. It could be very basic one, and there is a lot of let's say farmers or farming sector that lacks even these basic technologies. And thanks for pointing out the post-harvest, which FAO also completely concurs with, that even if you invest, the yield is quite huge. So here I'm taking a liberty, and we have organizations and others sitting here, or this will go on record. Why don't we think from a social impact perspective? We are sitting in an investment, let's say devising the pathways. So for example, a social impact bond that is underwritten by the development partners and maybe some of the partners such as the Emirates Foundation and other Kuwait Fund and so on and so forth. I'm just saying underwritten with private equity injected into that, and the technology, or let's say the practices for reducing food loss and waste, because there is a business case. If we can gain that 400 billion which is lost, an investment of 400 million makes perfect sense. Anyways, this is a point to ponder. Thank you so much for that. Now, you mentioned examples from Africa, and we have with us Komla. I believe Komla is online. Okay. So Komla is a senior advisor on agriculture in the African Continental Free Trade Agreement, which is a fantastic, let's say, success story in recent times and has a huge potential. So Komla, if you can share with us, we know the potential of the trade, or let's say particularly intra-Africa trade, this is huge. But if you can share with us that how exactly you are trying to mobilize, or let's say enable the investment opportunities in the agro-industry sector through AFCFTA, and particularly if you can kindly focus on the practices or the initiatives on food loss and waste through those agro-industrialization or agribusinesses in the AFCFTA context. Over to you, Komla.
Thank you. Good morning, colleagues. Sorry I could not join you in person because I'm traveling. And because of other official commitments. But I bring you warm greetings from the AFCFTA Secretariat based in Accra. And also, I must acknowledge the support and collaboration with FAO in supporting the AFCFTA implementation broadly, more specifically on ensuring that the continent continue to gather momentum towards satisfying our food security needs through intra-Africa trade. First of all, I must mention that the implementation of the Continental Free Trade Agreement continue to gather momentum. As you know, it is one of the biggest free trade area across the globe. In the African context, we're looking at a population of over 1.3 billion people with a combined GDP of more than 3.4 trillion. This is huge, but for us to be able to be successful in the AFCFTA implementation, it has become evident that considering that agriculture continue to be the backbone of Africa's economies. Therefore, the effectiveness of the AFCFTA implementation will depend heavily on the success of agriculture and agro-industry related interventions and how much we are able to produce and trade among ourselves. Therefore, agriculture and agro-industry sector remain a priority to the continent in the context of implementing the AFCFTA agreement. I think that I must put on record. Now, how do we do this? We realize that the continent is not able to trade enough with respect to agriculture. Currently, agriculture trade remain below 20%, depending on the source of figures within the continent. While the continent, again, also continue to import high volumes of food for grains alone. As we speak currently, the continent depends heavily on grain import to satisfy our own food security needs, while we have the capacity to produce. In the same context, just let me give you some figures. As we know currently, we stand at about 173 million tons of consumption in terms of grain, whilst the continent loses also about a third of its grain production. That totals about almost 49 million tons of grain is lost along the value chains as we speak. Therefore, what we have done in context of the AFCFTA implementation is to explore options that will support countries to be able to store their grains more properly, to reduce losses along the storage systems and food reserve systems, so that even if they are not able to produce more, at least they can be able to save the little that they have been able to produce, and if possible, be able to trade in the context of the AFCFTA. So we're supporting countries to define strategic investments that will allow them to reduce post-harvest losses along the value chain, and so that they can be able to satisfy domestic food security and also be able to extend to exporting grain at regional level. I give you a practical example. For example, we're working with the government of Zimbabwe, where we noticed that in the year 2019, this government produced about 200,000 tons of grain for domestic consumption, whilst they need about 1.5 million tons of grain. So there was a huge deficit. In 2022, due to the government's own productivity enhancement programs and investments, they were able to produce about 2 million tons of grain. And last year, in 2020, they were able to produce almost about 3.4 million tons of grain. This country's national requirements about 2.5 million tons of grain currently. So they have an excess of almost 1 million tons of grain, which they could be able to export to the regional markets. However, we noticed that because of the storage conditions within the country, because mostly the storage is through open platforms, some few warehouses, and few strategic reserve systems that have adequate drying, cleaning, temperature regulators, etc. So the government has decided, therefore, to improve its strategic reserve system by 1 million tons, so that they can be able to satisfy domestic food security and also be able to export grain to the region. So we're working with the government to enhance investment within the strategic reserve system. At the same time, also to support the government to be able to add value to its grain, so that they can be able to meet also domestic food security in terms of processed food, and also be able to export processed food to the region. So what the AFCN Secretariat basically is doing is to use our convening power as a continental body to bring partners together, help countries to define strategic interventions that is targeted at food loss, mainly post-harvest losses, because if you know our part of the world very well, more emphasis is actually on food loss, because that is where the biggest problem is. Food waste really, even though it's an issue, but it's not as critical as the losses that we experience along the value chain. So we're using our convening power as a continental body to bring partners together, to help countries to define strategic interventions that help them to be able to help countries to be able to undertake strategic investments that help to reduce food loss, especially post-harvest losses. And our focus currently is on the grain, specifically the grain system. So we've been able to, as we speak, define these interventions in at least 10 countries to help them to reduce post-harvest losses by increasing or by reducing losses along the value chain, especially within the grain sector, by strengthening strategic reserve systems, by strengthening agro-processing along the value chain, and also with respect to agro-processing, more emphasis is being put on industrialization, or specifically through establishment of agro-industrial parks or food parks or processing zones, depending on the terminology that you're familiar with. And this is happening at both national level and at regional level. Currently, I'm in Zambia, where we're discussing establishment of a common agro-industrial park between Zambia and Zimbabwe, specifically just to support these countries to be able to process their grains and dairy products and be able to trade between themselves, and also be able to trade within the region or export processed agro products within the region. So there's a lot of work going on within the AFCF area. For example, in Tanzania, we're working with that government to strengthen the fishery value chain. For example, in Zanzibar, we're doing the same in Comoros. So a lot of emphasis currently is being put on strengthening agro-industrial development, agro-processing, more specifically for domestic food security and also for regional export. And we are working with our member state of government to define these strategic investments. And I must mention that these are really transactional in nature, that they are profit-oriented. They're not just for social gains. Therefore, there is a lot of emphasis on partnership with private sector, both domestic and foreign, to be able to achieve this target. So what I will say here is that, yes, there is a huge opportunity to invest or to partner with the African Union, the African Continental Free Trade Secretariat, to support our member states to be able to undertake these strategic investments that will support domestic food security and also food export within the region, and then to the global, to feed into the global food security chains. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Komla. Please convey my regards to Wamkele. In fact, I personally have some, let's say, affiliation with AFCFTA. I was the first one. I was in UNCTAD back in 2015, and we did 3 studies on agri-value chains that could be done through AFCFTA. So I completely understand what you were saying, and really happy that you're working towards that and gaining success. But you mentioned a fair investment case, let's say, where we need to invest not only in the post-harvest, but along the supply chains, particularly trade, storage, and so on and so forth. So thank you so much. Now, our the next speaker is Tony from Tony Blair Institute. But Tony, I know that TBI for Global Change works more on the governance systems and, trying to, let's say, work towards the enabling governance structures for many of the issues. And I believe that one of that certainly would be food loss and waste, particularly in your portfolio in Africa. So if you can share with us that what type of governance changes or, let's say, enabling environments that you envisage would be much better for inducing more and more investments into mitigating food loss and waste, and if there is any success story that you have achieved thus far, so that we can make a better case for investing into changing the governance and regulatory structures as well. Over to you, Tony.
Thank you so much, Ahmed. And yeah, I want also to appreciate the opportunity to be on this panel. Speaking last, obviously, I don't know, sometimes makes things easy or more complex because most of the things have been said. The context is very clear. The numbers are very alarming, as you all saw. So I think there is something that really needs to be maybe taken seriously as we actually conclude this series of sessions around investing in agri-food systems is the sense of urgency. I think it's not by accident that this is coming last, and where I'm speaking is really to emphasize that. And as Ahmed said, I work for the Institute for Global Change, founded by Mr. Tony Blair. And our role is to work with political leaders to drive change and make things happen. You know, we are embedded in governments, and we provide advisory services on policies, on strategies, but most importantly, on delivery. So how do we make things happen? And we also make sure that we leverage the power of technology. And I'm happy to be seated just next to Frederica. We had a good conversation yesterday on how to make this half of our portfolio in Rwanda, for example, is really on fast-tracking innovation and technology in everything that we do. So while my intervention is really around ag and food systems in general, we definitely understand the importance, you know, of food loss and food waste. And Rwanda is a country where, as you saw from what Divine presented, I really take this opportunity to say, you know, my greetings to the former FAO colleagues. I happen to have worked in FAO for 4 years in the past, but also as a cabinet minister in the government of Rwanda, and also, in the private sector briefly. So I really know how important it is to push for certain, you know, of these aspects. So I think what I would really want to emphasize here is that, yes, you need the right enabling environment, absolutely. But I don't think that's really what has been missing much in many of the countries where we work, because we are in about 17, 18 countries in Africa as TBI, but we are in more than 30 across the globe. There are quite a number of good policies, good strategies. There are even certain guidelines. I know FAO contributes a lot in that. I happen to also have worked in that space, generating knowledge and getting governments to understand what needs to be done policy-wise, strategy-wise, you know, and in other areas. But I think governments with the private sector and other development partners really need to make the right investments in what needs to be, you know, tackled. So if I take the example of the food waste and loss, in Africa generally, we are dealing with smallholder farmers with very limited pieces of land. So one thing that you want to fix before even thinking about post-harvest handling is really making sure that you optimize production on those small pieces of land, which means you encourage consolidation and bringing these smallholder farmers together to be more efficient in producing what needs to be produced. That contributes to food security, obviously. But then before you reach a point of post-harvest handling, at least you are sure that you have optimum production that you would take to another level. So once that has been done, and this is one of the things that the government of Rwanda particularly invested in, as I said, I happen to have worked in the government of Rwanda as a minister in the Ministry of Agriculture. That policy of consolidating land and making sure that farmers come together to, you know, as cooperatives made a huge difference. We are talking of more than 2 million farmers, smallholder farmers, on a piece of land that is not than more than 1.2 million hectares. How do you make that work if you really don't put in place that policy of bringing these smallholder farmers together? So now you reach a point where you have that production. Obviously, it needs to be improved because productivity remains an issue. But then you cannot afford to lose that production. That is not to start with enough. And you need to really optimize the land that these people are working on. So again, you have to make the right investments. You cannot allow, very scattered small facilities to handle production or to, different produce that comes from the smallholder farmers. So you also need to be able to aggregate and invest, strategically in facilities that are going to allow really enough produce to be managed, to be handled. So this is really what the government of Rwanda has done. I think when you're in a country that is, is small in size and has small land and has to deal with a big population of more than 13 million, this is the highly dense population in Africa, maybe there's no choice. You really need to be able to make the right investments. And so that's why we felt that we needed to also make sure that we attract the private sector and make the right investments together. So the facilities that we have in the country at the moment allowed really to bring, quite a good amount of production together. And the post-handling is done pretty much easily. More investments are needed. They need to be attracted, and that's exactly what we are also trying to do. There's also another investment that was done about 8 years ago of an East African commodity exchange. This is another platform that allows not only to reduce the amount of produce that is lost, after production, but also, allows to, get these smallholder farmers access markets, but also easing access to finance. Along the discussions that we had since Monday, there's a lot that was talked about around access to finance, the technology innovation, and all those. But I think you need to be able to be in an environment where different players can work together to address those challenges. So the commodity exchange is another investment that really made a huge difference. Rwanda is currently investing in really a feasibility study for a food campus in Kigali, in the Kigali city, which is again quite highly densely, area, more than 1.4 million people. So that campus also would allow to reduce losses, but this time it's also talking about waste. I think at the moment there's an assessment going on in the city of Kigali, to address the issue of loss or the issue of waste or food waste. Because at the moment, Rwanda is attracting many tourists. So hospitality is booming. It's becoming a business destination, business tourism destination, which means that, many people are coming to the country, a lot of food is produced, and so you need to be able to deal with the waste. So that investment is extremely important. So as maybe I end my intervention at this point, I think what is also important to understand is governments, obviously, I like to say that when we were dealing with agricultural transformation, it was already quite complex and difficult. Now we are talking about ag and food systems. So the governance aspect in government, working with the private sector and development partners, becomes even more complex when we are now talking about ag and food systems. When we were talking about agricultural transformation, it wasn't easy actually to attract the environment departments or the health departments into the picture, and they would not even understand clearly why they were needed, because it was mostly around increasing productivity, increasing production, post-harvest handling, getting the product to the market, but without necessarily looking at the environmental aspects or the health aspects. Now, we are talking about ag and food systems, which means the governance structures and mechanisms need to be even stronger. You need a platform, or we need platforms where more players need to come together and need to speak the same language. This is exactly what we are trying to do at TBI. As I said, we are embedded in government, so we are neutral players who make things happen. We have specific and special delivery mechanisms that we've established in different government ministries to make sure that these institutions speak to each other, and most importantly, key projects are implemented. And that's exactly what we are trying to do in the ag and food space. We have also specific interventions we are working on which I'm also happy maybe to elaborate on, later. Thank you, Ahmed.
Thank you so much, Tony. You are certainly not the last. We have plenty and just few minutes. Okay, thanks a lot. I think very important points. The power of or the power of unity, let's say, or the collective investments or the aggregations, because that's a big issue or probably one of the impediments for not having sufficient investments into agri-food sectors in general, but particularly on food loss and waste. And Rwanda, by the way, is not a good example. I'm a huge fan of the paradigm shift of the governance. I think you guys are excellent in terms of the governance structures, but this is an excellent example to learn from. Regardless of the small population, when there is a will, there is a way. And Rwanda has established that. So kudos to you and great to know that you are part of that one. Excellent. So now, colleagues, just to confirm, is Divine still online?
Yes, I am.
Okay, Divine, listen, I feel that this is the area where we are getting huge investments in future. And since we are in FAO, you and I, we have to get our salaries and divisions expanded. It's a good opportunity for our commercial break. And if I may request you to share with us some of the knowledge and the other interventions that FAO is doing in the area of food loss and waste, particularly this knowledge gateways, the platforms, and the guidelines and so on and so forth. If you can kindly share that in 2 minutes, because I'm told that every minute costs 20 millions less in the budget that we are going to get for investments. So you have 2 minutes to get $400 million. Over to you, Divine.
Okay, that's very challenging, and thanks for the opportunity again. Let me just do my 2-minute thing and just talk using my slides here, and I think it will. So I stopped by speaking about the connection to the SDGs on this slide. Can you see my slide, Ahmed? Is it okay? Okay. So listen, I am sure the audience is aware of the interventions going on at global level and led by FAO in particular. Well, this the UN Food Systems Summit of 2021, and following that, there was a stock-taking moment in this year, looking at the national pathways that countries have formulated as a follow-up to the Food Systems Summit process. 70%, okay, of all countries that have prepared national pathways, 70% do recognize the issue of food loss and waste as an area for intervention. That is impressive, and that is within the context of an intention of governments to intervene in this area. But of course, governments cannot do it alone. They have to work with the financial partners, with regional organizations like the one Komla, Mr. Komla BC is working for. But the intention is there, but there's also this groundswell of attention to this area. Now, when you hone into these national pathways and you see what the governments are saying are their intentions, you see here some of the areas for intervention that are referred to in those national pathways that were talked about in the previous slide. So it's awareness raising, it's data, very, very important. So if you don't have data, you can't make informed decisions, and you can't even know where to invest. So the data aspect of it, I think, is a key dimension, because we have to have evidence-based interventions. And you see down there, infrastructure figures very well, food processing, food labeling, speaking again to the issues that Ahmed noted about consumer behavior, the cold chain, interventions in that area. And definitely, like I said, no one stakeholder can do it alone. So partnerships are very, very important. So this is what is reflected already in the national pathways that countries want to carry forward. Coming back to FAO, one of the areas that we are working on as a global organization is in normative and standard setting instruments. So why we are qualified to work as FAO in this area? FAO is a member organization. It's a platform for nations to meet, to come and talk honestly. So FAO provides that neutral forum for these discussions to be undertaken, and in doing that, then we provide a forum for the different normative and standard setting instruments to be developed. So you see here an example, just a selection of some of those normative instruments. Now, as you can imagine, if you don't have these normative instruments, you can't even conduct trade, you can't set even standards for food safety. But just going to the right, the latest and related to our topic of today is the Voluntary Code of Conduct for Food Loss and Waste Reduction. So as you can imagine, if everybody did their thing their own way, we will not achieve significant progress on this issue. So this Voluntary Code of Conduct attempts to standardize the actions that are needed, to lay down some principles that are required to guide our interventions, be it from governments, from the private sector, from civil society, academic institutions, even organizations like the one I work for and the one that Mr. Bisi works for. So this standard, this voluntary, and we need to underscore that it's voluntary and it's not being forced on entities to adopt it. This Voluntary Code of Conduct then is an instrument that can help us in making progress in this area. So this is one particular area of intervention that FAO has, and it is just one. There are other areas, but in the interest of time, I have focused only on this one. There are other areas: capacity building, awareness raising, technical support to our members, and so on. And we definitely looking forward to opportunities for collaborating in these areas. I have here some examples of some of the articles that are contained in that Voluntary Code of Conduct that I referred to. So here there is an article targeting the governments on policy frameworks. Here there is an article targeting value chain actors, so the private sector. There are also articles within this Code of Conduct that are targeting the financial institutions. As you can imagine, financial institutions need to be informed how to better design their lending portfolios following sustainability principles. So through the Code of Conduct, we provide some guidance on the things to look out for and the principles to be adopted. Now, the Voluntary Code of Conduct is a global instrument, and what we've done is we are adapting it to different regions. And in this particular slide, you're looking here at the adaptation of the Global Code of Conduct to the NENA region, the Near East and North Africa. So the host country and the host region for this event is this would be relevant to them. So this adapted guideline then provides principles and actions, and also, as you can see here, investment areas, and actions that the different actors will need to carry out to reduce food loss and waste. So, Ahmed, I know you're pressed for time, and I would just want to stop here and again thank you for the opportunity and also express our readiness as FAO to work in this area in collaboration with other partners. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Divine. I was positively biased towards you. We have a $400 million investment envelope. Your portfolio particularly qualifies for that, but since you ran over time, you are left with 117.83 million. So do a program for that one kindly. Now, listen, we have a very short time. As a moderator, I'm really bad because my colleagues had given me so many questions to ask you. Sorry for that. I'll send you afterwards. But since we have an agreement on the $400 million investments into this one, let me ask a question to the panelists. You are being interviewed as a potential CEO of that $400 million investment fund into the food loss and waste. So I have three questions to ask. I'm self-assumed Donald Trump in this entrepreneurs thing. The three questions are that if you are, let's say, managing that fund as the head, what are the first three steps you would take? Or you can mix that, what are the first three thematic areas that you would invest in? And second part of that one, who would be your partners in order to really create an impact? If you allow, we can go to Komla to basically finish the online colleagues because they might have limitations, and then we'll get back to Floor. Komla, are you still with us? But
yes, I'm here.
Just 2 minutes.
Yes, for me, the first area to look at the continental level currently, it will help the continent to really strengthen our strategic reserve systems. I mean, we cannot continue to only realize that we're not able to feed ourselves just because some two partners are fighting some 8,000 kilometers away. I mean, this is not right. So first of all, I will invest heavily in ensuring that what is produced is saved, through enhancing national strategic reserve systems, number one. Number two is also to endure, to add value to what we have been able to save so that we can be able to at least reduce our heavy processed food import bills. So two areas we will be focusing on. One is to help strengthen national strategic reserves by reducing losses and also to help add value to what we already have so we can be able to reduce our food import bills and save some money, for other sector investment. Thank you.
Thank you so much. You save time, you'll get 10 million extra. Thank you very much, Komla. So let's go to our panel in the reverse order, if you kindly allow. Tony, I don't want you to be the last one. So you have $400 million ready for you. What would you do?
Yeah, so Ahmed, I think it would take time to unpack what I would do in each of the pillars, but I think the one obviously would be to make sure I make the right investments in the infrastructure for food. And I mentioned the food campus, for example, is really an infrastructure that brings together so many, components and to address the food waste. But the other area, obviously, technology. I'm sure Federica might repeat that, but I think at the moment we really need to leverage technology across everything we are doing. And last, but certainly not least, is an area where we are at the moment. We need to strengthen governance mechanisms and structures in our different countries to make things happen. That's, I think, it's an extremely important aspect that we also need to consider. Thank you.
I was right when we were told that money is very attractive. None of them mentioned about the partners. Both of them said the actions, but not the partners. Anyways, let's go to Federica. What would you do that?
Thank you. Yes, as Tony said, that technology is definitely one of the priority I would mention, particularly for what I've said before, that there are areas in which there's simple technology that can be accessible, that is readily available elsewhere, but that needs to be transferred to these countries. But even more importantly, before, I would invest in strengthening the information systems, having data accessible, ready, on where the losses are, where the gaps are, because we have broad data on countries, across countries, scattered. We do not know exactly for each type of crop, each type of value chain, where the greatest losses are. And this is the first step to address challenges. Third is capacity building. There is no technology adoption without capacity building, and that is a very important point for us. So I would say sometimes losses are due to even lack of awareness of techniques, know-how. So any technological transfer process needs to go hand in hand with capacity building. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Khulud. It's not just the order of speakers. Probably you have the $400 million. So please let us know.
I think Frederica covered them all. I was going to highlight the importance of awareness and capacity building. Technology and innovation is something that we're already investing in. And really the infrastructures and looking at the logistics. I think making sure that we have storage facilities, we have the logistics management sorted out. Sometimes we can't rescue food simply because the logistics and the infrastructure is not helping that, and the capacity building side as well. Thank you.
Thank you so much. We are really short of time because we have a session exactly in this room at 10:30. But it is very difficult to summarize. But I think in this session, and I mean it because we had many sessions, we had some points or key takeaways that we can actually start implementing. I think one, if I can borrow the words of Tony, we have to aggregate our efforts as well. We have to really, combine our efforts. There is a very clear business case to invest in mitigating food loss and waste. So let us think about some of the mechanisms where all of the partners can get together. And nowadays, as I said, it does not have to be that you have to inject money into that. You just have to inject your knowledge, your own experiences, and then, the results would be there because like many other developmental areas, we do have a lot of money, we have a business case, but probably we are doing in bits and pieces and in our own silos. So let us combine our efforts. Let us sensitize the importance of investing into food loss and waste, and particularly in the areas those are mentioned. I personally believe that the information, data, and all of these nodes that in normal sense may not be attractive, but I think in food loss and waste they are. And certainly the capacity building and the knowledge platforms that Divine mentioned, and of course at African Union level, African Commission, they are doing at the regional level, EU is doing its own regional. So let us all combine efforts, but in the end, I think with these claps, I think we need to have, if not that loud, but at least half loud clap for our excellent panel. And thank you so much, participants. I think we have to have a customary photograph with the panelists, and then we hand over to the next session. Thank you so much.